yesterday is pretty symbolic. And like I said in the last one, that sense of holding stuff in, it's kind of more settling now. When I say settling, it's like, transitioning, to everything is by, seasons, cycles, ages, and eons. You know, seasons last for a spell. Witness that, tracking that, major and minor cycles of it all, again, especially when it comes to my life. So, and as I was just reflecting and, preparing to communicate to appropriate parties when needed, it's like, this particular season, just like, everybody, we're all subject to the weather, regardless of our resources and responses to it. Something we all experience, so it's what's happening as the aeon shifted, which was one of the earliest messages when I came online officially and for good, cosmic and quantum channels. We're talking about, again, it's not just the age of Aquarius transitioning. This is an eon transitioning, and one that held, again, not so much a prophecy, but a myth of the ages. Again, from what I've learned and where I am, using the words and the major and minor religions that been gifted to us to better understand and make sense of all of the forms and essences in existence. It's a story surrounding the cosmic Gnostics like to call Abraxas, and the Mayan Celestia Circle calls that same being Kukulkan. And as we've been engaged in, all you have to do is look up the many different stories and interpretations of the origin and the similarities between the two. And really, again, from my experience, you will have discovered just about all of the reasons why everything we experience is what we experience. Like I say, from the highest heavens and the scariest hells. From one extreme to the next, everlasting, all density through all incorporeal spiritual dimensions. It's all taking place within the cosmic / quantum body of the creature known as Abraxas / Kukulkan, And that's another thing. We'll see how far it goes, but at least the past couple months, members of my family of light, mostly, and some shadows, have been, kind of encouraging me to talk openly and in such type of recording as this about, my experiences, with my tree of love, as I've called it, from ages of 10 years old to 42 years old, because it really has been incredible. And, as I've discovered throughout my life, even down to, certain comments I write under certain videos or pictures and stuff. Some people just be saying some incredible stuff. Like, damn, bro, if you had not said that kind of deal, if I didn't just realize beings like you exist from you writing that shit, it's like, bro, it changes things for me, and for better or for worse, even beyond value-based judgments, as I've been saying for a long time. That's a lot of responsibility, and whether you're talking above ground or underground, especially with the top 3 and bottom 3% of society, that power of persuasion is everything, but, it's just some deep stuff, and it's something I've always had, but something I've always kind of rejected, even though it's not nothing I can really stop or control without ending my being, because it's just how I operate, how I exist, and, with all of the maturing I've done, experiences that I've had, like I said, the feedback has gotten that much deeper. Like I said in our other video, it's one of the reasons why I've been so effective, especially professionally. And before I set my boundaries as they stand now, very much so personally and privately. And like, two of the last friends that I had was saying almost involuntarily, like, yeah, bro, you like that, you open yourself up to being all kind of used. You know what I'm saying? Like, goddamn, don't you think I know that? That's where I'm at with it now. But, like I said, taking that steps-based approach, really truly giving grace more than the accountability for the vulnerabilities of relationships, us being pack animals, and a lot of us having those desires for deep connection and intimate partners, even sharing those stories, is inspirational, and like I do every day for work, helping people to learn, to heal, and to grow, So yeah, that's something else I'll probably open up about here shortly. Because, as we would say, among many other sayings, our culture and community and family, at this point, I'm here for the duration. You know what I'm saying? Which means the long haul, And like I said, it's symbolizing this impromptu and unexpected, quote unquote mainstream event I was at yesterday. Very, very nice, yacht cruise, black and white party, movers and shakers in the area, specifically in, our industry, mental health, behavioral health, social science, social service, it was really nice. But, in my life, even though it was a big part of it seasons ago, it's something I haven't really experienced in a long time for a number of reasons. So, it's pretty symbolic, for a number of reasons. And I knew, like I said, bro, going into it, there's slight anxiousness, excitement, but at the same time, like I said, there was several layers of symbolism that I knew, walking into it, it's going to have me with the feels, and my awareness of it all increased. And, sure was that. And I said, like, yeah, bro, I'm probably going to either record something before it or after it, to breathe it out and, stamp, the milestone and the change, by documenting it in a way such as this, So, yeah, probably talk about that as well. Again, see how long this goes, but like I said, things are really, really busy, but very significant, and that's something else that's coming up, everything that I experience internal manifesting externally. Even stuff that happened decades ago, or 10, 15 years ago. It's like, coming together now, like that's what it's for. And one of the things I realized, because we were talking about, especially the past few years, like, it's like time speeding up, this, that, and the third. And, connecting it both physically and metaphysically, and talking about, we're going into areas of light, just like, the Kuiper Belt and Oort cloud, asteroids and different other materials, areas where there's an abundance of light. Naturally, things speed up, and again, that's more a matter of our perception, because light always is. Even in the presence of shadows, light permeates that and comes and goes as it pleases, beyond any density or restriction. So, that's what's really been happening. And, since, these realities, really came online, Great Rectification and Grand Reunification and all of that, new heavens, new hells, new earths. It's like that's what is causing all of these changes and things to happen, these shifts and transitions and forms and essences being not so much assigned anymore, but aligned to where their frequency and their densities and the locales of the dimensions. It's pretty much almost like attraction and fusion and fission. Things implode or explode. Even though it seems chaotically random, boy, let me tell you something. Very, very specifically managed, as I would say. Every electromagnetic pulse of intent. Every quirk of energy is assessed, weighed, and assigned and aligned, And again, beyond any value-based judgments, it's just the way of nature, and that's what we all adhere to and have been overseeing, So again, it's just all to say that's why, things are so comfortable now, is because that shift happened. It's like now things are slowing down again, in a much more settled way. It's almost like, it's like the four yugas, Imagine it like the transitions happen. It's like seasons of turbulence, rough patches, but, the air, just like the seas, have now calmed. And you can experience, in a more serene manner. And man, I'm telling you, especially the past few weeks or past couple months, it's kind of what it's been like. It's almost like, like an athlete in the zone. Things just slow down, and it's just an incredible experience. So, just like along with that eternal spring of heavenly joy, it's just a constant state, as much as you could possibly experience while still in the density of this form. That's pretty much what it's been like, at least for me. And, some of the people that I work with or listen to. So, yeah, we'll talk about that as well. It's 15 minutes. So, let's see. Breathing it out. So, yeah, it's another thing I would say is about. I would say about, this recent experience, as you would say, from one of our favorite hood movies, Dead Presidents, people be doing too much of that mainstream stuff. People, soaking up the attention and say, man, high profile ass, high profile stuff. And like I said, never really been me, but it's always something I understand and respect and appreciate to a degree, and so much of my life, like I talked about, and videos before, and in my training videos. It's like at different stages and seasons of my life, it's like this was always like almost like I was supposed to do it, expected to do it. It's why I was so good at sports. It's why I was such a good rapper, musically inclined and writing and all of that. And at least the people around me, the good and the bad and the ugly of it, always treated me like I was on that level, of a public figure, larger than life kind of deal, but again, it was never something that I really wanted for myself. But just like now, like I said, I concluded, especially with where I'm at in my career and what is coming together, I know that's the reason why I didn't have any biological children, or relationships didn't work out because I had a bigger commitment, and even with, my mom and my brother, we obviously, at least amongst us three, would talk about it consistently, especially around Father's Day. That was even beyond and before my little cousins and some of the, hood youngsters and, stepkids I supported raising. Like my mom and my brother was like my kids. And like I said, definitely that act of what we call in developmental psych, that parentification, at such an early age, it's like viewing my mom as my daughter and taking care of her as such. That's almost an irreversible developmental trauma, you know, and we talk openly and specifically about it, and every Father's Day, my brother saying it, like, and mom giving gifts like Happy Father Figure Day kind of deal, and that's just a product of my parental spirit. But like I said, if the few very specific women that I wanted to raise children with had worked out, or the community avenues I was willing to take with multiple women at those times, bro, there ain't no way I would have done none of this. You know what I'm saying? The quiet impact or the overt impact I've had, in my career, definitely, and other areas of influence, and now putting together these big meso and macro level projects surrounding parenting and youth development and family studies, person and family centered care. There's no way I would have sustained this commitment to do all of this in society if I would have had my own biological children and been with a consistent wife or wives, So that's the main reason I know I always say it begins and ends with spirit, why it didn't happen, even though it's so close on several occasions. That's one of the realizations I accept now, especially, with it coming off, trying to see how and if it will go. Like I said, especially as we talk about the men in our family and that Harris/Fitzgerald gene. It's like, bro, get into my 60s and 70s and start having kids, even if I, it's always going to have to be intentional one way or another, but we'll see. That's another reason why I'm patient, those two things. And obviously, I think I'm finally getting over, I won't call it an illusion of love because I've had it and I've shared it and come close with a couple of them. It definitely would have been love babies. But just like I've healed, and I would say in certain relationships, at an advanced level between true bonded partners, you would have to be able to comfort or support your partner's inner child. But now at this level of healing and growth I'm at now, it's like, bro, that just won't be necessary, at least for me, and even though if and when I get into one or multiple intimate relationships like that again, Again, that won't be necessary, and like I said, it may lose some of that cuddly love that, the ones closest to me would always enjoy and talk about, because that was fueled by that. But I think it'll make us more balanced and effective, because that's the last thing I'll say for now. Again, talking specifically between bonded partners who really love and committed to each other, one of the things I've learned, from my root lovers, as I would say, the 5 root lovers in my tree of love, it's like, bro, to be very careful putting one or the other or each other on a pedestal, you know, especially when it originates or can be impacted by your adverse childhood experiences, your attachment traumas, because especially when we into it and, conflicting and not feeling each other, that's when the pedestals we put each other on start to pretty much make the other feel unapproachable and make you yourself feel like you're unworthy, and just like the heart of all anxiety, it's an ideal in your head, it's your response, and obviously, especially, the 2 wives, the 2 fiancés, and beginning with my first love, like I said, shit, we talked openly about that shit in real time. Each time and every time, when we loving each other and when we not feeling each other, and specifically why. So, and again, it's all a product of individual healing and doing your work, and the person can support you. But just like family counseling 1-on-1, nobody can function for you. Even that little bitty baby, her little body got to function on its own, And again, that's God's autonomy. That's one of nature's design. So, yeah, that's going on. We'll see how it goes, especially like I said, bro. It was a nice event, bro. It was a party, I ain't been in a party like that in a minute. And, I was in party mode, off and on, very tempered but intentional, especially, who I was with, who was around. There was a lot in it, but it was a good time. It was really affirming. And like I said, like I've known in and out and around the industry at the levels I've been at, it's just part of it. There's no way around it. The cloud is the cloud. These resources, making music and building fan base, this, that, and the third. Yeah, you can do that, but even that is rooted in the social capital, being on the scene, being and staying engaged, networking, and for a lot of reasons that I used to just pawn off as interpersonal, and my interest level and not being around people, this, that, and the third, that was just me talking around the hardcore truth of my very staunch geopolitical views, cultural views. And like I said, all of that is coming to a head now. I got a good balance with that as well. And like I said, it's another part of this transition, Certain parts of me are always going to be just like the symptoms of complex post-traumatic stress. But having said that, change and growth is a non-negotiable. And really truly making this last transition to, like I said in that other video, announcing allegiances, I may not always agree with this, that, and the third going on at this sector of society, but just like this quote-unquote rule of law, the judiciary, it got to count for all of us. It's just like playing sports. We all got to adhere to the rules, otherwise we're not playing the game. Everybody doing their own thing, this, that, and the third, we can't play. So, it's one of the things gradually we're going to continue to see is the end of that rules for thee but not for me. Oh, divine right of kings looking ass, thinking that that's what time it is. And again, bro, it's thousands and thousands of years transitions happening with leadership and policy and vice on this planet. You know what I'm saying? That's some Jupiter ascending stuff. Not everybody ready for that, but it is the truth beyond any verbal interpretation, debate, or denial. It's just what's happening, you know. But thankfully, like I said, the respect that has to be shown, and those of primordial galactic history and knowledge, you know, done just an excellent job supporting through grace and accountability, you know, our new generations and new creations coming into taking over, you know, stewardship for the new and existing structures of its dimensions, you know. So yeah, and table that right there. And I'll probably go 30 minutes and probably just make a separate video summarizing again that tree of love, especially with the transitions that are happening now, one way or another, wherever I land. We'll talk more about the parental spirit, you know, and how it informs my programming that we're putting together. What else? I think that might be it. Yeah, that might be it. So I'll schedule those and we'll see how it goes.